Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of 5 Elements of Success Player Development Series. I'm Roger Knick, founder of Junior Golf Hub, and your host. I'm here again this week with my co-host Tyler Campbell, Director of Performance, also Dennis Hillman, the Director of Coaching. We'll also be joined by Dr. Josh Brant here momentarily as we start talking about the mental game. Before we get started, COVID-19, let's stay safe. We're safe here. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there playing some golf. Hopefully you are getting on the golf course and playing more. Before we go any further, we're going to talk about the Pdi Self Assessment. Those who have done it, thanks so much. It's been great, good responses. I know from last week we had more than 40 people watching and getting the self-assessments done. So thanks so much for doing that. We love your feedback. So please give us more feedback. 5elements@thegolfperformancecenter.com, or you can send comments to YouTube chat. So I'd love to hear from you so we can help you reach your goals. Also, we have another pop quiz this week. We're going to be giving away a tailor-made sim driver. If you answer the question to Dr. Brant's list of mental skills, if you can look at the list on the screen right now, you'll see that was listed. Which of the following mental skills have the greatest impact on performance? So we're going to be drawing out of the hat those who answered correctly. Later in the show, we're going to be giving that driver out, so please stay tuned to see that, and hopefully you win that. Good luck. Tyler, last week, can you talk about, what we talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to recap where we've been, if you missed any of the first 4 episodes, they are available on juniorgolfhub.com/the5elements. Last week, we had our second episode covering the topic of coaching. Dennis elaborated on the Pdi Self Assessment golf skills, and we really wrapped that assessment up for you. So just to recap the Pdi Self Assessment, there are 4 components. We want to look first and foremost at the interview and really why we're playing the game. We want to get into the grit test, determine how gritty we are as an athlete and as a golfer. There's a physical component, which is going to assess how well you're moving relative to your golf mechanics. And then lastly, there's the golf skills component, which is going to look at everything as simple as a 3-foot putt to 6-iron draws and fades, different ball flight control. So we also talked about long-term athletic development versus the quick fix. The PGA of America has rolled out the American Development Model, ADM model, if you will. And so if you're working with a PGA coach, be sure to ask them if they're implementing the ADM model. It's very important that they're aware of this system. Very simply, the one takeaway we want you guys to have here with long-term athletic development is how important it is to develop fundamental movement skills and a solid athletic foundation first and foremost before developing your golf skills. So often we see juniors come in with overdeveloped golf skills but no athletic foundation, and it's kind of a tortoise and the hare analogy, if you will, where at first it might seem like that golfer who's got early developed golf skills is going to be the one who wins the race. But if you're going up against an athlete who has a solid athletic foundation, who's playing a lot of sports at a young age, it's not uncommon to see that golf athlete surpass the early developer in the long run. And then lastly, last week we talked about coaching versus teaching. We know the definition of teach is to cause to know something, and we know that that's obviously an important part of the process, providing the information of the topic to the athlete. But coaching goes beyond that. Coaching really, helps the athlete determine, where they are in their development, asks the right questions, along their journey, and helps guide them from point A to point B. So some great topics on coaching. Again, view those episodes on juniorgolfhub.com/the5elements.
Awesome. Tyler, thanks so much for that recap. And talking about coaching, we're going to be talking about the mental coach here shortly. We're going to welcome in Dr. Brant, but we're going to talk about judgment and what you may be feeling as you're going through some of these self-assessments and also in other things in life. Also intrinsic and extrinsic factors as well, and mental, the name of the game, if you will, on the mental side, and the introduction, if you will, to the mental game. Dennis, I know as we've been looking at some of the comments through the Pdi Self-Assessment, I think we're hearing some players feeling, hey, I feel a little judgy and what that's feeling like. And I know we've experienced that here through even our assessments if you go through at the academy. Maybe give some insight to what's happening there.
Yeah, we've seen it for many years here, taking our juniors through assessments 4 times a year. We call them the 4 majors. It's very common to feel maybe dejected, based on your results. But it's really, again, it's really important part of the process to go through that that process of having some stress, being put under the microscope. So, you know, we know that's what champions do. They don't avoid those moments. They actually seek them out because they really, you know, they really appreciate the information and how much it does for their development. So it doesn't matter what your results are. Again, adopt that growth mindset. You can really improve from where you are. So just use the information.
And you want them to do that as often as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have prescriptions on juniorgolfhub.com/5elements. So we have some forms of practice you can do to improve your skills, and then continue to reassess. So again, seek out ways that you can do that. Doing it by yourself is one assessment, really, if you think about it. And then, you know, have some other people, you know, watch you afterwards and put some more pressure on yourself and see what the results are.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do here a lot with our junior players is that we put them in situations where the group is around them and they're having to hit those shots, so they kind of start to feel what that's like. And so if you're able to do that, maybe your parents, maybe your coach out there, or some of your friends, you know, have them watch you as you're going through this process. I think that'll help you understand or get that awareness of judgment. But, you know, speaking of that, Dr. Brant, you know, clinical psychologist here at the Golf Performance Center, talk about what these kids or what some of these players are going through when it comes to judgment.
Yeah, for sure. So judgment is a normal part, it's a normal reaction really to any assessment. So going through the self-assessment here at GPC, it would make perfect sense that you would feel judged by that, right? Your weaknesses are being exposed. Right? Our normal reaction to that might be to avoid that. However, we know very clearly in order to develop yourself as an athlete, you really need to lean into those moments of discomfort. And really, any assessment, when you think about it, right, the design is to help you learn, right? It's not to judge you. It's not to make you feel badly about yourself. I think that's something that is more of a societal pressure when you start to try to compare yourself to other people. But really at the heart of any assessment is the desire to help you improve or learn, to give you feedback about the things that are working and the things that aren't working. So really important when you when you're taking an assessment, even though you're feeling potentially judged by it, really to see it also as an opportunity to learn and grow. The other thing about it, if you want to dive into why you're feeling judged a little bit more deeply, you can start to think about what is the source of that judgment. Is that some internal pressure that you're putting on yourself, or is that you're more worried about what people are going to say about you when they read the results? So is it internal or is it external?
Right, that's really good. Hopefully you guys are listening to that. That's some gold right there. And that kind of leads us to the idea of, like, why does someone play the game, and what are they doing this for? Are they doing it for a means to an end, if you will, which kind of helps maybe players understand that intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation has a lot to do with this, and I think those factors are really important.
Yeah, in psychology we really distinguish when we talk about motivation, right? When motivation is probably one of the most important things to think about when you're taking on skill development, right? I would even say motive is more important than behavior. Really, it doesn't matter what you do; it matters why you're doing what you're doing, which is really going to lead you down one path or another. Intrinsic motivation: are you doing it for yourself? Is it something you're passionate about? Is it something you're curious about? Is it something that you really have some personal investment in? Versus extrinsic motivation, which is, are you doing it for others? Are you doing it for a reward? Are you doing it for trophies? Are you doing it to try to please your parents? Are you doing it out of fear of what your parents might say if you don't do it? So that's extrinsic. And it's important to think about for yourselves as you're watching, where do you fall? Younger players, junior golfers, have a tendency to be more on the extrinsic side, which there is some value to that. We obviously don't want that to interfere with your development, but really we also want you to think about intrinsically. Where is that coming for you internally in your own experience of yourself? Are you playing because you personally have a passion?
Yeah, that's really good. I think, Dennis, one of the things that we see a lot here as we talk to a lot of our players and understanding like why they're playing, I know that's a big part of our interview process. Sure. Is why are they here? And then how that relates to them playing in tournaments, why they're playing in tournaments. And, you know, we hear so often that, you know, parents come in and go, oh my God, they won the, you know, U.S. kids, you know, 9-year-old division, and that means he's going to be at this next level, right? So as we get into that, how do you help coach a player going through this journey, if you will, and you've experienced that quite deep.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important, what Dr. Brant just talked about with extrinsic versus intrinsic. So we definitely we always start with goals, but really defining the why. So it may not be clear to a junior, and that's okay, but if you continue to go through the process and revisit, what's my why as far as why did I choose golf, why did I choose this journey and have these long-term goals, and why did I come to the academy to get better? So, and then helping them work through, did it come from an extrinsic source or is it intrinsic? And a lot of times we see them try to, or start to commit better, right? Over time they start to commit and they start to fall in love with it more, and then I think the intrinsic motivation starts to reveal itself usually.
Yeah.
And that makes sense developmentally too, right? So as I said earlier, younger kids definitely are more extrinsically motivated. Oftentimes they're using their parents as models. They're trusting what they're saying and their guidance. And it would make sense that they would be more extrinsically motivated. What we hope to see in their development, and something that we nurture here, right, is that transition from extrinsic motivation to a more personal, deep, meaningful goal or passion for the self.
Yeah. Right. And what are some of the exercises that you would maybe talk to players about, to kind of, how do I get there? And maybe a parent needs to hear that. How do I get there? How do I help them kind of make that transition? And is it something that can just be done?
Yeah, no, I think like any skill development, it takes time. I think one of the most important things for parents who are watching too is to pay attention to what's your motivation, right? Is your motivation for trying to get your kid to develop as a player, is that more personal? Is that for your own gain? Or is it really to help the kid? Because oftentimes stepping out of the way, giving your child the space to fail, to make mistakes, is really most beneficial to their development. So I think it's really important to start looking at, not just as a child, what your motivation, or as a player what your motivation is, but also as parents too, what are their motivations too for trying to get you to be who you are.
Yeah, that's great. As we kind of move through this and understanding the mental side of things, I know on the golf side we talk about the nature of the game, to get the ball in the hole the least amount of strokes possible, and we want to do an introduction to the mental development, if you will. What's your take on your side of it, on the mental game of this, and not trying to separate it because it's all the same?
Yeah, no, you can't separate it, right? In theory, 100%, right? That idea of how do you get the ball in the hole as few strokes as possible. But the problem is we have a brain, right? And if we could keep it, right, I'd love to be Iron Byron, just striping the ball the same way every time, enter in a computer program, but we have a brain. So one of the things we talk about in sports performance is this idea of in order to control your performance, you need to be able to control yourself. Right? You're really trying to minimize the interference of your brain, of your thinking, of your feeling, and of your behaving, and to make sure that does not get in the way of your ability to get the ball in the hole and as few shots as possible. So when we talk, I just like to frame it simply as an introduction, this idea of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. When you think of a thought, Dennis alluded to the idea of growth mindset earlier, right? So what is your thinking? Are you someone who has a growth mindset? You're open to possibility, you're willing to fail, you're willing to dive into the process? Or are you someone who has a more fixed mindset, right? Where I'm not going to get better, I'm only a good driver of the ball, I'll never develop a short game, right? All of those things are more of a fixed mindset. We know for sure that nurturing the growth mindset within someone definitely increases the chances of performing. When we're talking about feeling, right, one common thing that everyone experiences on the golf course at some point is anxiety and adversity. What we know for sure too is that the people who manage that anxiety and adversity better, the elite athletes, actually everyone experiences it, but the elite athletes, the better players, are the ones who recognize that anxiety and actually are able to spin it into better performance. And when we're talking about behavior, again, there's lots of things. There's practice, there's play, there's practice rounds, there's all sorts of things you can do, but really important to also think about your body language. That's a very clear behavior that you can be mindful of. Are you walking down the fairway with head held high, with a confident posture, or are you someone who's looking down, frustrated, angry, not being present in the world? We know that behaving that way also has a clear effect on performance. Probably even more important, underlying all of those things, in order to develop control over yourself, you have to be able to develop self-awareness. You have to be able to develop self-regulation. And without the ability to even recognize what you need to control within yourself, you're really not going to be able to work on those skills. So one of the things that we really try to encourage in kids is the ability to be aware of what's happening in a moment. And actually the self-assessment is a good example of that, but we can also do that on the mental side by encouraging kids to be more mindful of their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and see how those feelings, thoughts, and behaviors are actually getting in the way of their performance.
So Dr. Brant, you talk about self-regulation, and a lot of times we hear in the academy from juniors and parents that, based on a junior's performance in competition, they failed or they're shooting different scores than they do in casual rounds, and it's all mental, or they're making mental mistakes is what we hear. Should juniors be able to self-regulate at a high level? Is that something we can expect from them?
I would say no, and I'm not saying that to be pessimistic, right? I think that unfortunately we're dealing with a neurological limitation, right? The younger you are, the less developed your brain is, and your brain doesn't fully develop really until your late 20s. And the last part of your brain to develop is your prefrontal cortex, and wouldn't you know it, the thing that is responsible for self-regulation is your prefrontal cortex. So asking younger kids, especially 10, 11, 12-year-old, to be able to self-regulate, I think would be unrealistic and actually unfair, and probably will lead to more frustration. I'm sure there's some parents out there who have been frustrated with their kid that they aren't able to manage a situation effectively, or control their anger, or control their nerves. Well, actually, you probably could back off and give them a little bit of space, because their nervous system really just isn't built yet, right? It hasn't developed yet to be able to manage those situations.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And talking about that, though, and one of the things that we've seen, and you read a lot about, the neuroscience of, development, and you see juniors, we all have kids here, and we talk about, kids and how they play and what they're doing and experiencing certain things. And I think, one of the things I've noticed is watching my kids grow up, and as they get involved in toys or puzzles or whatever it is they may be doing, of the reaction or non-reaction of the parent, of how that kid responds. And I think there's a lot more evidence now that as we interfere in that development, those kids struggle with maybe self-confidence over time, because now they're looking for that judge or that kind of right or wrong kind of response. And it's not probably the healthiest thing out there for not only athletes, but just people in general to grow self-confidence.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about resilience, right? Are we actually, by getting in the way, by not letting our kids fail, we're actually getting in the way of their ability to figure out life on their own, and not just on the golf course, right? Obviously, we're here at a golf academy, but you want to be able to have your child feel comfortable and confident in their ability to manage life outside of golf as well. So yeah, so by not allowing your child to develop that resilience, right? You could potentially be putting them at a deficit.
Yeah, I know one of the things we say here a lot is we talk a lot about, becoming your greatest self, in the classroom, on the golf course, and in life. And we do that through the medium of golf. And it's so many, things that we can learn through that. And I think, if parents could understand, and maybe, again, I don't want to beat you guys up. I'm trying not to beat up parents here. But at the same time, it is really important for them to kind of step back and let kids it doesn't have to be that instant gratification that we see so often, that, they don't succeed right now, they're destined to fail, versus looking at it as an opportunity for learning and growth.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest thing as a parent of two boys myself, right? A lot of the intervention, a lot of the action we take towards our kids, of course it's motivated out of love. Like the humble parent is the one that can separate what is in the best interest of themselves versus what's in the best interest of their child. And yes, we all think we know what's best for our kid, but sometimes we need to step back and allow them to develop and grow and understand themselves without our thoughts.
Yeah, I know, Dennis, one of the things you talk a lot about, that gift of failure, and we actually give that book out to parents and players here almost every year, how important that is to learn and kind of take ownership and responsibility of their actions out on the golf course and beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great kind of a manual for parents just to understand how letting your kids go and letting them experience failure and become resilient and develop that grit can really help them long term. So I highly recommend it. It's helped me. It's improved my relationship with my kids, and just understanding kind of what to say, and it becomes very subtle and nuanced. Really, you just don't realize your intentions. There's no question. I think I had good intentions before, but the way things come out, if you can say maybe a little different, can have a big impact.
Yeah, and that's the book of The Gift of Failure,
Yeah.
which Jessica Leahy, I believe, is the
Right.
writer, their author of that book. But I think that is so important that we understand that is a big part of building also confidence in that grit and resilience, as you just talked about. And confidence is one of those things that we look at and say, how do I get there? How do I build that and grow that?
Yeah, confidence really is about preparation, right? And inherently, it has to be developmental, right? You can't be prepared for a situation instantly, right? You have to have had that experience of failure. You have to have done a trial and error. What worked this time? What didn't work that time? And only through preparing yourself through that trial and error process can you actually build self-confidence, really self-efficacy, the belief that you can accomplish any task. So that's at the heart of confidence, for sure.
Yeah, and hopefully you guys are listening out there. Maybe you had a clue to pop quiz. But so that self-confidence and preparation, I know we go through lots of pain ourselves, developing plans and helping these young players learn how to be prepared to go out and play not only just recreational golf, but also that tournament golf, and that's a completely different animal. So you want to speak to that preparedness to get there to build that confidence?
Yeah, I mean that really is the way we look at it. Instead of the mindset that it's all mental. If you go out and don't perform at the level that you think you're capable of, or you have in casual rounds with friends or by yourself, it's not necessarily all mental. It could be just in your preparation. So from how you practice to every little thing, the right snacks in your bag, everything involved. But when we talk about really developing those skills in the right type of environment, that's what's critical. So as coaches, we actually try to create forms of practice in groups that we kind of push them into that ugly zone and push them into the failure, rather than try to pull them out and fix things and create the path of least resistance. So the more often, the more time you can spend there, the better.
Yeah, and I think if you kind of take time to ask yourself, am I preparing myself for the best results out there? Regardless of where you are, whether it's my best practice or going out and playing a tournament, am I writing down? We talk about going out and playing in the rain or practicing in the rain, because you're going to have to do that at some point. How do I pack my bag for that? Do I put a rain suit in? Do I put 2 gloves? Do I have that stuff available to me? And I think that gives players confidence, knowing that they can go out there and not feel like they're not prepared for that, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of I played collegiate soccer, and one of my soccer coaches had this great saying. He said, "There's no such thing as bad weather, just poor preparation."
Yeah.
And he meant that literally and figuratively, right? Like literally, if it's raining, you want to have a raincoat. But also he meant, right, the better prepared person doesn't experience adversity, right? Because they know how to handle the situation.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And hopefully you guys are doing that, and you're giving yourself that little bit of added preparation to build that confidence up. Is this a good time maybe to kind of share maybe the answer to our pop quiz?
Yeah, sure. I hope that it's pretty obvious right now, but of those mental skills, right, every single one of those is critical, right? And some of them may struggle with some, and it might be the strength of another. But overall, probably the most important psychological or mental skill that is going to correlate to success for you is confidence.
Wow, you guys heard it. So hopefully you've gotten your answers in, and you maybe win that sim driver, tailor-made sim driver. So again, thanks for sharing that. And let's talk a little bit about, again, beyond that confidence. So next week we're going to be talking about the fifth element, the equipment side of things, and how important it is on the mental side to have confidence in your equipment.
Yeah, confidence again is preparation. The more prepared you feel that you are, the more confident and more capable you think you're gonna be. And if you do not want to be fighting your equipment, right? We want to minimize interference. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing, it is in the best interest of getting that ball in the hole in as few shots as possible. And having the right equipment can go a long way to that. If you're standing over a shot and you're not comfortable with the clubs that you have, that could really get in the way of your ability to play well.
Yeah, that's great. So confidence, hopefully you guys got that right. Dennis, so we just got through last week our first PDI Self Assessment. I know we've been having some questions, and I think you did a great job and a very thorough job of describing what was happening. But you know, I know we had a fair amount of questions coming in about ball flights and certain things. You want to talk a little bit about some things that they need to know?
Yeah, so one question is just how do I interpret my results, and what do they mean? Is it okay if I got red? If I got 0 out of 9 ball flights, does that mean I'll never be a good player? That kind of thing, but that's just not true, right? Again, adopt that growth mindset, take the results for what they are. Again, we have the prescription, so you can go ahead and work on those forms of practice, reassess yourself, do it every week. Again, keep revisiting that, put yourself under pressure with other people watching, so that would be really good. Another question really is just, can I get better, really? I mean, how do I get better? So, again, that's why we came up with the prescriptions, but, I think it's just back to the judgment. Guys, it's okay. Champions seek out these forms of practice. Champions seek out feedback. Champions seek out places where they can fail and just become stronger and more resilient and more grit. So I think this is just important to really kind of have that mindset as you go through this.
Yeah, again, leaning into that, I think that's really important that they're able to do that and understand that this is how they're going to get better. That is the pathway. All the greats have done it, so it's not one of those things that it's only you doing it. It's everyone's done it and everyone's failed at it. But under that microscope, it's really important to lean into that. Yeah, absolutely.
Embrace the struggle. Like Tom Brady's football coach at Michigan said, he never saw anybody embrace the struggle like Tom Brady. And you talk about a guy who wasn't highly touted coming out of the NFL, having that kind of success. It's pretty impressive.
Well, the GOAT who built confidence by leaning into those things, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So Dr. Brant, before you kind of step off the show, let's, on the mental side of things, some questions that came in. I know we had a few questions out there on the mental side. So Alex, if you could share those questions with Dr. Brant.
Sure. Dr. Brant, first question. How important is the mental game in your success as an athlete?
Yeah, so how important is the mental game to your success as an athlete? It's interesting. I've actually asked that question a lot. I think I've asked that question of everybody I've worked with. And I'll frame it this way. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you think the mental game is to your success as an athlete? And I encourage you to think about that in the audience right now. Not surprising, most people will say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's 9 or above. Everyone feels like it's really important. The interesting thing is if you follow that up with how often do you practice the mental game, right? How often do you practice it like putting? How do you practice with your short game or your irons? Not surprisingly, that response is rarely or never. So clearly it's important. Clearly we don't practice enough. And the great thing about GPC is there's a real commitment and understanding of how important the mental game is to your success.
And next question from the audience. Does confidence level and first tee jitters correlate?
I'm going to say no. I think they're separate issues, right? I think you can be incredibly confident. I think one of our constant models that we bring up here on the show is Tiger, right? Tiger, even to this day, reports how nervous he is on the first tee. If you look at some of his first tee shots at Augusta, it's incredible how many times he misses the fairway, and he might be the most mentally tough athlete ever to play sport. So confidence, I think they're separate, right? First tee jitters, I think that's a normal part of play, something that you can actually prepare for, but just like the self-assessment, I would expect it to be there. But confidence, I think they're separate issues.
And our last question from the audience states, I start playing great on the front, say I shoot 36, but I close with a 40 or more on the back. How do I address that?
Yeah, there is not an easy answer to that as well. I think that's one of those questions I'd have to know a little bit more about what's going on. But often, that could be mental fatigue. It could be overconfidence. It could be one of those things where if that happens to you quite often in your play, you have this expectation, okay, things are going well, and now when am I going to screw this up? Right, so that could lead to it as well. But any of those situations can be remedied. So I'd be happy to answer that question at a later time, knowing more specifics about what's going on.
Great. That's all we have. Thank you, Dr. Brant.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Brant. It actually kind of reminded me, and I know we had talked and discussed this, we were going to talk about this on the show, but is that it kind of gets me back to the idea of when you're out playing by yourself, right? And you're out on the golf course, and it's just a casual round, and man, you're lighting it up, and you're in such good flow, and then all of a sudden you go, hey, I got the tournament tomorrow, and I go out, and I don't feel the same. Can you explain like what that is and how that maybe affect a player?
Yeah, maybe it's a typical explanation of a psychologist, but I think it's simply a matter of perception, right? I think we view different situations differently. We actually give it the meaning that it has. There's a great saying I like too, which is we are meaning-making machines, and we get to decide what that means. So I think when it's a tournament round, we make that matter more, and I understand why, and it's hard not to fall victim to that kind of external pressure, right? The eyes on you, judging you, how am I going to perform, versus when you're out on your own, you have no pressure. It really is just you and the golf course. So I would say one of the things you might want to work on, right, is reframing that experience in a golf tournament, right? Trying to approach that feeling state that you have when you're alone, and try to bring that to your tournament play as well. I know it's easier said than done, but that's what we would want to aspire to.
Well, you mentioned Tiger. I mean, it sounds like even the best players in the world, they deal with these things, right? They deal with these emotions and thoughts and stress responses. They've just learned how to manage it, right? And that takes time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We all have the difference between an ordinary and an extraordinary golfer. We all have adversity. We all have failure. The extraordinary golfer recovers faster.
Yeah.
Right.
He learns how to do the ordinary extraordinarily well, which is just going through that process and understanding that those are impediments and those things are going to be in the way, and learn how to deal with them.
Yep.
As you said earlier, self-regulation and understanding awareness is really key.
You got
so
it.
hopefully you guys got a lot out of that. Dr. Brant, that was fantastic. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Obviously you'll be back, and we'll be doing a lot more on the mental game as we go through the shows in later dates. Dennis, on the PDI and the self-assessment, again, we're just talking about, getting out there and putting yourself out and playing in tournaments. A lot of players now are going out to play in the summer, or what's left of summer tournaments, if you will. Any advice on the coaching side of things there?
Yeah, I think the self-guided assessment is a great form of practice. Again, if you just do that by yourself, build up a small group. I would say get out and play for real. What we see a lot is, you go out, and if you're playing well, you play for real and keep a score. And if you're not playing well, you kind of, you don't play for a score anymore. So I think the more times you can go out in those casual rounds with your friends and say, all right, on the first tee, I'm going to play for a score. I'm going to write it down on the scorecard. Now that we kind of have this extended preseason and there's not as many tournaments to play, but you are preparing for when they open up, try to create little tournaments with yourself within a week, maybe 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row, a 54-hole event, maybe with some friends, and make it count, if you will. I think that'd be good.
Yeah, awesome. And kind of wrapping up the PDI self-assessment, I know we had some physical questions. We bring Tyler Campbell back on to maybe address those. And Tyler, you've had some questions regarding.
So again, guys, in the PDI self-assessment, there are 4 physical screens. There are 2 that are a little bit more complex in the world of assessments and assessing our movement. I'm going to address the overhead deep squat today. So here are a few additional notes on the overhead deep squat that you should be paying attention to as you go through the test yourself. So the very first is your stance width. When you set up with proper stance width for the overhead deep squat, I really want to make sure that your big toes are directly under your armpits. So if your stance is too wide or too narrow, your results are going to vary. The second aspect of the test that I really want to reiterate is that when you set up the bar on top of your head, before you place the bar overhead, your elbow should be at approximately 90 degrees. All right, so then you place the bar up overhead, and if you proceed to go through the deep squat and that bar falls forward of your toe line, you're going to mark yourself with a yellow or a red. So common mistakes that we see or compensations in the deep squat are, as your hips lower, your feet are going to want to flare, or the bar is going to want to come forward, or both. So another way to challenge yourself with that is to go up against a wall. So if the wall was right in front of me, just off my toe line, and I went to execute the deep squat, and that bar fell forward into the wall, then you know right there that that bar is coming forward, and we're going to have to mark yellow or red. Work on it with the prescriptions that we've got on the hub.
Yeah, Tyler, one of those things, though, I had somebody ask me a question about this, was if I have pain, If I'm trying to do this and I have pain, what would we need to tell them?
100% stop. Just stop what you're doing. If you're feeling pain, and pain is a little bit different than discomfort, so I'm gonna put that out there as well. I always like to say pain is something that you're saying, Coach, I don't want to do that again, that hurt. Discomfort is I'm tight, I feel stretched there, okay, I haven't moved this way in a while. That's totally normal because we don't expect that you're doing this on a daily basis. But pain, please stop doing the motion and honestly seek out some medical attention for sure.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks for that recap. So you've gone through the PDI self-assessment. You've gotten some feedback. Again, continue giving us feedback. Write in, call in, text in. Let us know. 5elements@thegolfperformancecenter.com. Or if you want to go to the Junior Golf Hub, log in. There's some comment sections there. Please, fill out any comments. Before we go, we're going to talk about what's going to happen next week. We're going to talk about the fifth element, the equipment side of things. So it's going to be we're going to have Nick Novak, our director of GPC Custom Clubs, talking about, equipment and how to build confidence and gain confidence with having the right equipment for the task and the job. And that means for junior golfers to adult golfers. So you're going to need the right equipment for that as well. Also, we want to just remind you that coming soon, you'll see a registration for July 25th. We're going to have a full PDI full assessment here at the Golf Performance Center. So be on the lookout of that on the Junior Golf Hub, the Golf Performance Center. Also, we'll also plug it on this show again next week. And Notah Begay 3 National Championship Regional Qualifiers starting in July. We'll be going out and having PDI coach-guided assessments. So we'll be out there putting eyes on you and helping you, and hopefully you guys are out there playing and trying to qualify for that national championship. Again, thanks guys for participating this week. Thanks Dennis, Tyler. Oh, I almost forgot, before we close out, we got a winner. Alex, can you announce the winner of that Sim TaylorMade driver?
All right, guys, drum roll. We need a drum roll here. The winner is Luke Gagnon. Congratulations, Luke.
Luke Gagnon,
right.
Congratulations.
Well done,
what a win there. That's fantastic. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for everyone who's participated. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, either in our preparatory, achieving your greatness in the classroom, on the golf course, and in life, and Junior Golf Hub, and also to our hosts, the Junior Golf Hub Network. Thanks so much. Again, until next time, see you next Tuesday, 12 p.m. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your journey. Thanks so much.